Welcome to the K-State Regen Ag Pod, where we talk all things regenerative agriculture here at Kansas State University, across the state of Kansas, and beyond. I'm Nick Detter, your host, and today I'm joined by Annie Rowell and Todd Bramble of King Arthur Baking Company. Annie serves as King Arthur's Sustainability Impact Manager, and Todd serves as the company's Director of Industry Engagement. They join me today to discuss King Arthur's Grains for Good program and the partnership with K-State and Kansas farmers that has resulted from it. Annie, Todd, thank you for joining me today.
Hey, Nick, so great to be here.
Yeah, I think just to start off, if you, Todd, if you would mind introducing yourself, and then Annie, you can go after him, and we'll just learn a little bit about who you guys are and what you guys do at King Arthur.
Absolutely, Nick. I'm glad to go first. It's funny when I was thinking about joining you for this podcast, it's a little shocking to me that I've spent the last 30 years working in the business of flour. It started back in the mid 90s when I took a job at a small bakery in Portland, Maine, and just got super fascinated in flour and the functionality of flour. And that led me to go to K-State, where I got a degree in grain science. And from there, right around the year 2000, I left and came back to New England and started working for King Arthur. And I spent the next 11 years working at King Arthur, selling flour up and down the Northeast to small and regional bakeries. And after being there for 11 years, I left and joined a couple other flour milling companies in the United States and was gone for 13. And then so fortunate that I got about a year and a half ago, I got to come back and rejoin the team. And it's just been so great to return. I get to draw upon a vast bit of experience and really lean into the job that they presented me with. Really, my job is pretty much working with our flour milling suppliers across the country. We engage flour millers big and small to produce the product for us. And managing that supply chain is a big part of my job. And then the other part of my job, which is a big part of why I'm here today talking with you and Annie, is working on the Grains for Good program and really marrying that up with our efforts across our supply chain base. So it's just really great to be here, Dan. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Well, we're always glad to have a K-State alum on, and I think we've actually had quite a few, and I think you're the first one though that left the state of Kansas. So it's good to show that just because you go to K-State doesn't mean you're trapped in Kansas for the rest of your life. uh, and Annie, could you tell us a little bit about your background and your role?
Sure. Well, a K-State alum is a tough act to follow. So I'm the sustainability impact manager at King Arthur, which means that I think about how sustainability shows up across our business. And so what that means in day to day is I focus on our sustainable sourcing and thinking about where all of our ingredients come from. And wheat for our flour is such a primary ingredient as a baking company. So that's where I spend a significant amount of my time. I also think about circular economy, think about packaging and waste, as well as our footprint and thinking about emissions reduction. So I have been with King Arthur for just over 2 years, and King Arthur's headquarters were in Vermont, in a small town called Norwood, Vermont. I grew up and live in a town about an hour and a half north of there, and I come from a family with a long history of farming in Vermont, and really my career over the past 15 years has been focused on building sustainable supply chains. So first, kind of with a very small community-based nonprofit, and then all the way to a gigantic global food service company. And so it's been really great to land at King Arthur for the past couple of years here and be able to work with such fantastic folks like Todd and so many, including K-State.
If either one of you guys could just tell us a little bit about the history of King Arthur and anything you would want our audience to know about the company.
Sure, Nick, I can give a little bit of background on King Arthur. I mean, I'll start with it never ceases to amaze me. King Arthur is the oldest flour company in the United States, formed in 1790 in Boston. That's 230 years ago. It was a family-owned business when it got started. And the business was really importing flour from England into the original 13 colonies. And so right from our origins, we were in the business of providing high quality flour to bakers in this brand new country. Fast forward 230 years, we passed out of family ownership and now we're a 100% employee-owned benefit corporation, um, which has allowed us to really focus on and refine the message of baking and the experience of baking and bringing high quality ingredients to our customers. I think, just to put it simply, we're really in the business of getting people to bake. It's what so many of our employee owners lean into that each and every day. And it's really about focusing on education, inspiration, and just really helping people feel successful when they go into their kitchens. I mean, everybody loves to make something beautiful and tasty for their family and their friends and to bring to their events, whether it's church or school or whatever. And King Arthur leans into that and focuses on that each and every day. I think that's our customer base. I think it's never lost on us though that we are a business that is built on wheat. We cannot do what we do without wheat being grown in the center part of our country. And I think so much of what we will talk about today is the ways in which we're leaning into and hopefully supporting the men and women and their families and the communities who provide that wheat, not only to us and our customers, but to our nation and all the different products that are made from it. It's great to be at a company that is so focused on their end product, but also at the same time so aware of where that product comes from and all the families and individuals that are part of that process from the fields in Kansas and North Dakota and the center parts of our country, as far away as northern Vermont and Southern California. So it's an exciting company, and employee ownership is just I can't say it enough. That is such an important mindset. And the last thing I'll say on that is it feeds into what we'll talk about today. It allows us to take a much longer term view to the various projects that we lean into. We all know that change takes time, and changing soil health and improving soil health is definitely not something that takes place overnight. And I think an employee ownership mindset and ownership structure is what allows a company like King Arthur to take that long view and make these investments that we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, I think that's a really good lead into that, just that specific investment you guys have made in Kansas farmers and wheat, your wheat supply chain across the nation. And that's your Grains for Good program. So, Annie, would you mind kind of outlining for us what that Grains for Good program is? How did it come about? What are some of its big goals? And just what should people know about King Arthur's effort through this program?
Yeah, absolutely. And Nick, if you don't mind, I'll back up a little bit too and talk a bit about our why of kind of why is this an area we've focused on and why we care about. And I think as Todd put so well of, as a benefit corporation and certified B Corp, we care about all stakeholders, including the environment, our suppliers, the thinking very inclusively across all stakeholders. And that's really built into who we are. We always start with our values first. So community, stewardship, quality, passion, and employee ownership. And we talk about them all the time. And so our aim is to keep bakers baking and farmers farming, and the future of availability of wheat and supply chain resiliency we know is dependent on the ability to grow in topsoil. And so some of the things that we pay attention to and we learn and ask and are part of a lot of conversations around, what does topsoil, thinking about topsoil loss, what does that look like in regions where crops like wheat are grown? Something else that we also know is happening is just the long-term decline in the number of wheat acres in production, due to market conditions and many factors. So in addition to wheat also being such a critical ingredient for us as a baking company, something else that we also know is that wheat is a critical crop to have in the crop rotation for soil health, that it brings that diversity. So these are some of the things that we think about and kind of how we started the early part of this decade to think about how can we lean in more, and we made a ambitious commitment to make a our 2030 goal, which is to source 100% regeneratively grown wheat by 2030. And that's really what set the stage for what now we refer to as Grains for Good, which is how we think about our soil health and regenerative wheat program and work. So for more about kind of what is Grains for Good? So as an employee-owned benefit corporation, we also know that we're a unique company. Our approach is based on how we can support the farmers and millers we buy from to scale practice adoption and system change and broaden public knowledge. I love how Todd put it earlier too, just that our ownership structure allows us to take that long-term view when we're thinking about investing in change. And so, put most simply, the primary objective of Grains for Good is how can we support layering multiple soil health practices on the same land over time? And that's where we know the real improvements are made. So the kind of key pieces that we think are unique and really important about the program is that we're building relationships with the same farmers over time on the same land. As a place-centered program, context is everything. So local expertise with research partners like K-State and technical advisors, really kind of spending time to find out who they are and to lean into that expertise, looking and really paying attention and understanding regional growing conditions, kind of pulling in those regional pieces that are so critical in farming and producing crops. Also, we're based on the leading indicators of soil health, and we do that through soil testing and practice monitoring over time. There's a great organization we've worked with called the Sustainable Food Lab, and they have a really neat framework they call the three-legged stool for practice adoption. But as we think about how we work with farmers, we love to kind of borrow from that framework, thinking about there's kind of three critical functions for these sort of programs working effectively. First is a financial incentive. We know that it is important to support to kind of de-risk change, and to also kind of demonstrate our commitment to being a partner. Technical advising, again, reinforcing that local expertise and local technical advising is critical. So those partners play such an important role in the program. And then supporting and building the surrounding culture through peer-to-peer networks, and just how are we kind of supporting and creating the new norm kind of through all parts of the community.
Well, what I heard you say a lot, and I think what I find encouraging is that emphasis on local and context. When we talk about regenerative ag at K-State, that's one of kind of our core pillars is making sure that like you're applying regenerative agriculture techniques and principles, but within their proper context. And I think sometimes, and as I've had some experience of talking to other players that want to get involved in this space and want to work with farmers, like that can be the biggest hurdle to kind of get over. Is I think a lot of times they want to find like a one size fits all approach, and so I think it's really cool to hear you guys are really working hard to kind of tailor your definition of regenerative agriculture and soil health practices to make sure they're matching the actual context the farmers are farming in. So, yeah, I guess kind of in that same vein as you've done that work and you're working to grow this program and connect with farmers, what have been some of the main challenges, and what have been some of the main highlights?
Absolutely. Well, I can kick us off on some of the challenges, and definitely want to pass it over to Todd here too. So, kind of in the same piece, and I love how you just emphasize that context, and I think that's something we've paid so much attention to and leaned into folks like yourself, as we try to understand and find those leaders in different communities. And so that's a super important part and a real challenge of really identifying who are the leading soil health advisors in each region that are best positioned and resourced to support farmers. And if under-resourced, what role can we play in supporting that? I think also, just and being place-based, that we're constantly learning. There's no uh, magic rule that fits everywhere. And so how just paying attention and learning and that it is a living and evolving space, and how we kind of can build that into the structure of a program. And on that, really not making assumptions that once we've learned one part, that we've learned everything. And so that just continually keeping an open mind. So those would be some of the challenges I'd highlight.
And really, Nick, from where I sit on the supply chain side of our business, I think the biggest challenge, and as I mentioned in the introduction or in my introduction here, we as a company work across the entire country with across a broad array of flour milling companies, flour milling assets that help support our business coast to coast. And that is a range of some of the smallest mills in this country to some of the biggest mills in this country. And so trying to overlay a consistent program across all those different critical suppliers for King Arthur. It's a rewarding challenge, but it has definitely been a challenge. And each flour milling company is in a slightly different place in their journey to along the regenerative ag soil health spectrum. I will honestly say this. Everybody has been supportive of our program. Some of them don't know anything about it when we first started working with them, and they provided us with the resources and maybe even outside partners who could help us implement a program that would be used at their facility. And others are well on their way on their regen journey and have programs already in place. And so I think that's been a real particular challenge because we really want to have a consistent program from all of the wheat growing regions in this country. So our wheat draw areas are from the panhandle of Texas to North Dakota and into the Pacific Northwest. And so not only do we have different milling companies in different parts in different places along the way in their regen journey, we also have different growing practices in each of those regions. And so as Annie so beautifully spoke about being place-based. It's important to be place-based, but we also want to have a consistent program across that whole area and across our supplier base. So it's been such a fantastic challenge to try to figure this out. And we're in the early stages and we have a lot of work left to be done. But I think if I think about it like a highlight challenge, it would definitely be bringing consistency, a consistent program across such a wide geography and supplier base.
Yeah, I think that's the tension with context always is, like it's at one level, it's so necessary if you're actually gonna advise farmers, and because farmers work in a very specific context, like they're specialists. They're not general. I mean, they're generalists in the sense that they do a lot of things, but in terms of their geography, they're definitely a specialist, but where you're a big food company or a government program or a university, even throughout Kansas, we see a lot of differences. It's then how do you communicate information or create a program that can be meaningful to people within their specific context, but still is like intelligible across, the different contexts. So and from what I know about your work and the little bits and pieces I've gotten to be a part of it, I could see how that's like where kind of the core tension of the work that you guys are trying to do.
Absolutely.
So how about some of the high points?
Yeah.
What's something that you look back over the last 2 or 3 years, if you guys have been working on this, that you're like felt like a win and feels like things are going in the right direction?
Yeah, there was even just on the call yesterday, I loved that we were talking with a miller who just referenced how Todd and I are becoming such, common faces to see in Kansas of just, I think as we're, such a focus on spending time meeting with and visiting farmers. And so I think I love that part. I think it's so tempting to want to put a neat and tidy bow on all that's happening and tell this really linear story of the work that's never the reality. And so I love getting to know people. I love the moment when we get past like a superficial layer and start getting into the intricacies of the day to day, what's involved in making a change, learning about like what folks have been starting to see that's working, what's working on one field versus another, where farmers have started to see those improvements or shifts. I love this question of that a fellow from actually affiliated with the Sustainable Food Lab talked about asking of when something goes wrong, like or when a big uh, rainstorm comes or something like what do you seeing that's working? And so I love kind of hearing more on that perspective. I am so grateful for the patience and the tough questions that we've received so far and just how much time we spend on debriefing and thinking about those. You had Dr. Matt Sanderson on the podcast earlier this year, and we were able to speak with him a little bit. I loved talking with him about kind of thinking about cultural change in agriculture. And one of the things that, he said was that, like, most simply put, is we need to get into the mix. And so thinking about conversations just need to be happening across age, gender, region, scale of operation, you name it. And another thing he said I loved was talking about the need to have hard conversations about what we're going to be if we want to be together at the end of it. So there are many days where we'll end and I'll feel like, wow, whew, those were some tough questions or big challenges that we're talking about. And I always feel like we have learned something and we keep things moving. And so I think that is always a really just powerful way to end the day.
Yeah, and just listening to you, Annie, just the through line through all of your highlights really was the people, and I think what's as I said earlier, I've been in the flower business for a while now, and I think honestly, what's kept me so engaged and I just found the business so interesting is it is such a people business, and it's really a relationship based business, and I think about so often we're engaging with the various partners in our programs, supporters, advocates, and we're constantly told how different our program is. And we recognize we're a small company offering up a challenging thing for our partners to engage with us on in this space. And time again, the generosity of the people who are involved, whether it's our suppliers, our program partners, the farmers themselves with their knowledge, that I think I'm just really just basically building upon what Annie said, and that is just the support and the generosity of everybody who's helped along the way. And we're just getting started here, but for this first couple of years, that's really what stands out as the highlight is just all the support, the generosity, the people. And I know that's how we will ultimately end up being successful. And by we, I don't mean just King Arthur. I mean everybody who's involved in this, and most importantly, the growers in the wheat growing regions of our country. So that's just people is truly the highlight of doing this work.
Well, I've had the opportunity to, meet with you guys in Kansas a few times and go around with you guys when you're meeting some farmers. You've kind of participated in some events with K-State, and I can truly say that you are some of the most excited people to ever just have visited Kansas. I kind of say that tongue in cheek a little bit. People in Kansas joke about, we don't really get a lot of tourists, but I think that just speaks to the commitment that a company out of Vermont that you guys, are really interested in actually getting to know the people of Kansas, the growers of Kansas. I think that's one of the things that really excites me, because I think if we're going to be able to do this work and start it in a farm in Kansas to a company in Vermont, and then, maybe a consumer in New York or LA, like it's going to be by building those connections. And so I think your guys' commitment to that work, at least that I've witnessed, has been a really cool thing to be a part of. So I think the transition a little bit is, and Todd, you even mentioned this, is that sometimes you guys get comments about the uniqueness of your program. You're the first food company we've had on this podcast, and I feel like a question we get from farmers a lot, or when we're talking with farmers, and even at K-State, as we've kind of tried to think about this regenerative ag space, is what are companies thinking about, food companies thinking about regenerative agriculture? I think in some ways it does feel like there's like a growing movement, there's a growing buzz, but I think sometimes it's hard to like sift out what is real? Like what is actually like what is the actual interest level of like from a corporate perspective in these types of things, and what's more of just kind of hype? So I guess I'm curious how you guys view yourself within the space. Do you guys kind of view yourself as like a harbinger of what's more to come industry wide, or do you guys kind of view yourself as pretty unique and a one-off within your broader industry?
Such a great question. I think, investment from companies in how the ingredients for their products are grown. It's not new, and is, is always and will continue to be a big area of focus. And when it comes to, thinking about kind of regenerative growing practices and soil health, there are so many that are at the table to find a scalable solution. So we're just excited as we've, stepped more into this space. So we're excited to contribute more of our direction and ideas as we focus on scaling soil health research and learnings throughout our supply chain. We've also benefited and been supported by many learnings from so many companies too. So our focus is on bringing the experience and voices from so many of these groups, from companies, from to farmers, to millers, to technical advisors, to now in an opportunity to build the best soil health program that we can. And so we're starting to see that many in the industry are also diversifying from being dominated by a carbon credit type marketplace to kind of also so now with sort of a broader focus around the health of the soil itself. And so in our view, we think that that's an opportunity to have kind of a bigger opportunity to connect with more people who are critical to making that change, and farmers in particular.
Todd, do you have anything to add to that question with kind of your broader experience across the flower industry?
Um, I think I would just build upon what Annie said. I think another, returning to sort of the theme of people, I think, I was focusing previously on our flour milling partners and the farmers in the middle part of our country. We've also had the same level of support from our peers in the CPG industry, and we've reached out to many companies that are approaching this in different ways. I think, by and large, I would think our experience has been that there's a strong authenticity to how a lot of companies are showing up in this space, and a real desire to find the best path forward for their company and their product and their raw materials. So I think this is a really neat time in this movement here, and I think the more companies work together in this space, I like to think about the multiplier effect because, as I've said before, we are a small company, and our program, in terms of the number of acres that we can impact, is relatively small in the global scheme of wheat production and flour milling and baking in homes. But what I like to think is about, we were talking about this yesterday on a call with one of our suppliers, is like we can impact a very finite number of farmers in a certain region, but those farmers all have neighbors and those communities all talk amongst themselves. And so we really hope that our small investment, our small impact that we can make can have this multiplier effect and have a larger impact in the growing region in our country. And I think we like to think too that the more companies that we engage with, we get ideas from them, they get ideas from us. We share what's really a big challenge for us. They might have an idea that they've tried and then we can start to incorporate it. So I'm super excited about the people and the companies that are coalescing around this opportunity. And I think it's only going to grow from here. It's just such important work, and people are asking for it. And we can see the results even in the short term here. And we just know that over the long term, as more and more people are become aware of this necessity and the practices that need to be put into place, I think we'll start to see a real blossoming of the influences that all this work is imparting on the ground in our country.
Yeah, one of the things you said is people are asking for this, which kind of leads into another thing I wanted to ask. And another thing we hear from farmers is, question one is, what are companies thinking about this? And then question two is, what are consumers thinking about this? So what is King Arthur hearing as you guys have kind of I'm sure looked at like, I don't know what exactly all you've done, but how have you guys kind of approached, or what's your understanding of how consumers value these topics of regenerative agriculture and soil health?
We know that some of the top areas our customers care deeply about are the health of their families,
Mm,
the future state of the world, and soil health. We know that soil health is kind of is becoming more top of mind. And the free, as we think about, regenerative ag or regenerative practices, that there is a lot of interest and curiosity. People really want to understand more about what that means, and there is,
mm,
some confusion out there, and so they want to know what it means, how it connects to them and their baking. And so if we've since we know it can feel a bit abstract, we a lot of our focus is around how to make it kind of simple and relatable.
mm,
So some of the things that we do, working on making it easier to engage with, that starts with education, breaking it down in a clear way, and also offering deeper content for those who want it, knowing that we are working on and just the level of information and what we're learning is only gets deeper every day. So trying to temper that with the amount of information that folks are really looking for in a given moment. That also working on bringing more transparency. So as we build more relationships with farmers and folks in our supply chain, to share those stories and more behind the scene perspectives, and also to share share a real story, and for it to not be some kind of glossy piece, but also something about kind of what a real experience is, and how this work really shows up on farms. Um, and as we think about, for our flowers, it's, embedding into everyday baking, that it's something we want every baker to be part of and be connected to. So that's kind of plays into how we think about it across our flowers, from golden wheat and our whole wheat flowers, across the board. So those are some of the main ways we're trying to bring um, some more clarity to our customers as we continue to build out Greens for Good.
And the only thing I would add, Nick, is I think, more and more people want to know where their food's coming
mm,
from. They're interested in how their food is produced. And well, and Annie hit it well. There's great opportunity to educate and to highlight the importance of soil and improving the soil to customers all over the food map. And everybody wants to know more about where their food comes from, how it's grown, and that it's grown responsibly. I mean, as Annie said in the beginning, so much of our focus is on families and the state of the planet. These are all just topics that most of us are very, very interested in and want to know more about. And so I think in that environment, there's a great opportunity to educate. There's a great desire to educate, and this is what I said. One of the key things that we do is we're in the business of getting people to bake more, and education is a big part of that. And this can play into that educational message as we get the word out as to what we're doing, what others are doing, and then the importance of this work.
when you say that there's a desire for people to learn more and you guys are working on education, are there any specific questions that you feel like you regularly get from consumers, or have you guys spent much time kind of having more in-person dialogues with consumers at all, or is there anything that comes to mind about? Yeah, I don't know. The reason I ask is I think sometimes their farmers are wanting to know. I feel like I have a voice of a farmer in my head of like, well, what specifically is the consumer like curious about or wanting to know about?
Yeah, so last fall, for instance, we did spend a lot of time kind of in focus groups, and
Mm,
did an in-depth survey of like general population and our customers specifically. So we know that there is a connection between, what folks want to understand is, better soil means better wheat and better food for your family, of just like
mm,
the through line of that connection. So
mm,
those are, I think, that is that is a key.
Yeah.
That's a key through line of what we try to connect in this work. I think we're also trying to understand just kind of general kind of recognition of different terms. And it's a little tough as we're kind of questions are asked differently in different formats, but it does seem like the general kind of or at least that more people have heard of regen and kind of regen ag and think about, in at least in our kind of general population survey, it looks like, over 50% of the general population has heard of it, but don't really have a deep knowledge. And I think, what our aim with with Grains for Good is kind of without a centralized definition, that Grains for Good at least allows us to define it kind of what it means in the context of this program and kind of being place-based. And I think that allows us to bring some clarity in a space that that still has some confusion.
I think particularly that first question you mentioned about the connection between human health and soil health. I think that's one of the biggest questions I would say in this entire space. I mean, it's what at academia and the people I have some friends in government agencies like that's and to know and farmers, consumers. So that I don't know. I guess it's good to know that that's what consumers are thinking about too, because I think that it's important that as we in the more ag side of this think about how we want to communicate with the broader public, knowing that, the more we can find ways to connect soil health and human health, like I just appreciate you hitting home on that because I think it just validates some of how I've heard people, on the ag side think about, is this where the direction we need to be going? And so it's interesting to hear that that's also seems to be a high priority for consumers.
Absolutely.
Well, just to close it out, the question I like to ask all my guests, and take it as broad as you want. I think sometimes people like hearing things that are even non-ag related. They just like to hear what else is going on in the world, and that's just the question of what's exciting you in your personal work or kind of in your broader field. So really opening up the floor to both of you to close this out.
Nick, I just love this work. I mean, like I said, I've been in the flower business for a while, and having come back to King Arthur and being given the chance to work with Annie and K-State and others in this space, and it's really what gets me excited. It's such a great opportunity. It's such a giant puzzle. There's so many great people that I've met and I'm still get to meet. And I get to do that. And then as we talked earlier, this is a long-term project. So it's not like this is going to end anytime soon. And I'm excited by that fact. So, I mean, I love the great challenge that this project has presented me with. And I wake up each morning thinking about it. And I spend a lot of my day working on it. And by the end of the day, I don't want it to sound cliche. I'm looking forward to continuing the work the next day. So this is really what's bringing excitement to my life right now. I just love this work.
Yeah, I think, a couple of things. One is Suzanne McDowell, our VP of Impact, something she says all the time is, as we're finishing up, talk all the time. And I think about that a lot in terms of this work. And this isn't in and out. It's sort of, it's like anytime we talk, Nick, it'll be like, great, I will be talking to you again soon. And I think that's the general theme of how it feels. And I think like that's the level of engagement that feels really fulfilling for me. And I think that, as we talked about context earlier, like when context is considered, it is amazing kind of what it feels like that can unlock. Like we were in Western Kansas, we were in a place in Oakley, Kansas this winter. And I think there was just such a powerful moment with listening to Dr. Augustino Boer speak. And since his research was so focused on the area where the farmers in the audience were, and it was so awesome afterwards, just seeing this group surrounding him, looking at his computer and asking all these questions, and just to that's really powerful, and that's meaningful. And so I think when that those are the moments when maybe something maybe something feels more relevant and feels more applicable. So I think those are the moments of what really excites me there. And I at this spring, something else that's been really fun for me is I've been planting a lot of trees on my land here in Vermont, and that outside of work, that brings me a lot of fulfillment. So but just it's such a real pleasure to be able to do this work and to get to work with folks like you, Nick. So thanks so much for having us.
Oh, give me a home where the buffalo roam, where the deer and the antelope play, where seldom is heard a discouraging word, and the skies are not cloudy all day. Home, home on the range, where the deer and the antelope play, where seldom is heard a discouraging word, and the skies are not cloudy all day.